Black, City Manager. We want to take the next few moments to provide a preliminary briefing on two incidences which occurred this past Saturday, the Avondale shooting incident and then the Fountain Square post-concert incident. We're going to talk about Avondale first and then move into Fountain Square. The order of speakers for this afternoon, Mayor Cranley will provide remarks, then Chief Blackwell and Captain Neville will give us the details of both incidences, and then we will have Chief Dodowski, Assistant Fire Chief, to basically give us an overall update in terms of where we stand regarding All-Star Week readiness and preparation. At this time, Mayor Cranley.
Thank you. First, let me say that I think the whole city prays for China Kennebrew, the 6-year-old shot innocently in Avondale over the weekend. Our prayers go out to her, and I know that our gang unit, which we'll hear about briefly in a few minutes, are trying to arrest the perpetrators of this horrific crime. Secondly, I want to say that downtown in Fountain Square is safe and will be safe this weekend. I literally just had lunch on Fountain Square, Potbelly's, which is helping me get a potbelly, and hundreds of people were on Fountain Square. Thousands of people were on Fountain Square last night, Sunday night, to see the Women's USA team win the World Cup in soccer. Thousands of people were in Fountain Square last night, Sunday night, the night after this horrible incident on Saturday, having a wonderful time without incident. People who have been in Fountain Square over the last several years under the amazing renaissance and revitalization that the city and 3CDC have pulled together know it's safe. However, Saturday night was an unacceptable event, and I take personal responsibility for what happened. The fact is that there was programming to young people, unchaperoned young people, with a program that went past the curfew in the midst of a holiday weekend. That was not the programming last night. Last night was a World Cup game, and there were no incidences. This weekend, the All-Star Game is going to be programmed by Major League Baseball, by 3CDC. It's going to be family-friendly, and there are literally going to be hundreds of police officers visible and managing the crowd at all times. I promise the people of Cincinnati that this weekend and all coming weekends, Fountain Square will be as safe as we've grown accustomed to it over the last couple of years. Again, Saturday was a problem. I take responsibility. The fact is that programming was not appropriate late at night. 3CDC and the city are working together to make sure that programming doesn't happen again without the proper protocols, the proper staffing at the proper time, not running up against curfews, things of that nature. So all such programming targeting young people like that, unchaperoned, will be stopped until these things can be improved. The fact is, this weekend, there are going to be 60,000 people at Paul Brown Stadium coming out of the concert. There are going to be programming by Major League Baseball at the Convention Center and all over downtown. Our hotels are going to be packed. And 3CDC is going to be putting on programming at Fountain Square that will be family-friendly and will be policed by hundreds of police officers. So I do hope that we don't take one incident that was not good, that I take responsibility for, as what's going to happen in general and what's going to happen this weekend. Thousands of people were there last night. And lastly, let me just say that I've had a chance to speak to both Officer Joe Simpson and Roger No this morning, thanked them for their service to our city, for their injuries. And I think it's appropriate to end by saying that in light of what happened on Saturday night, our police department is the best in the world, showed enormous professionalism, enormous restraint, and got the situation under control. It's our job to make sure that that situation doesn't happen again. But once it did happen, our police responded politely and professionally and got it under control. And I want to thank them for their service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. At this time, I'm going to ask Chief Blackwell to come up to sort of give us an overview of both events, the Avondale event and the Fountain Square event. And Captain Neville, you will probably need to be up here as well. And then Assistant Chief Dodowski will give us a quick update on our ongoing efforts in terms of All-Star Week readiness and preparedness, and then we will take questions after Chief Dodowski.
Good afternoon. So we're talking really about two separate events. So I'll talk a little first about the tragedy in Avondale. And what we have there is not unlike Chief Gary McCarthy is dealing with in Chicago this weekend, where a 7-year-old was killed as his father was the intended target. This little girl was shot as her father or stepfather was the intended target. Shots rang out on a very quiet afternoon in Avondale. Unfortunately, she was struck twice. The individual who was targeted doesn't have an extensive criminal record as an adult. He does have an extensive criminal record as a juvenile, including involuntary manslaughter and felonious assault, served several years in prison. We believe it is an ongoing dispute between him and another group of individuals that we are trying to identify and target as we speak. That is the Avondale. As far as preparations for this week coming upon us, we have been working diligently for nearly 2 years in the planning process for all of the security endeavors surrounding the Major League Baseball All-Star Week. Mike Neville was quick to remind me that he takes responsibility for things, but he also wanted me to share with you that violent crime is down nearly 50% in the central business sector this year and over a 3-year average. So we're not panicking now. While, as the mayor alluded to, it was not good what happened this weekend. Certainly not good from an optics standpoint, as well as the realism of an innocent individual being beaten up like that, and our officers becoming injured. But we are, in large part, making good strides with the safety of our downtown. We encourage everyone that was planning on coming down to do so as well this week for the events. Mike?
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to give you an overview of what occurred Saturday and explain how it started with some closure as of today where we are. There was an event on Fountain Square Saturday night, began at 8:30, late in the evening. Around 11 o'clock, as the crowd was quite toward capacity on Fountain Square, we had officers on the square, both on duty and an off-duty detail. Right around near the fountain area, persons were throwing firecrackers and other items at officers. One of the officers, as the mayor alluded to, Officer Roger No, went to make an arrest. He was struck in the mouth. He tased the individual that did that, made an arrest. As he was making that arrest, another stepped forward and hit him again. That person was also tased and arrested. Both of those individuals are adults, and they are facing felony assault on a police officer right now. And Mr. Joe Dieters is working to assist us. With that, the commander on the scene called for not only assistance, but standby cars from around the city. Nearly 60 officers showed up. They took a particular formation dressed in protective attire to address the crowd still on Fountain Square. As they were doing that, clearing Fountain Square, obviously some went over toward Government Square. And within the front of the crowd, as we approached, we learned that there was a gentleman who had been assaulted, involved in an altercation. He was in somewhat serious condition. He was taken to the hospital. I would tell you that for his protection, the officers surrounded him. He got his treatment and was released from the hospital with a concussion, a broken nose, and facial injuries. With that, after the 2 arrests, the tasing, we did have a total of 7 arrests, 4 of them being adults. By the time around 12:15, about an hour and 15 minutes later, things calmed down enough that the officers who were requested from other districts began to return back to the originating assignment. I would tell you that as I heard behind me, I was very happy with the way this worked out in the police department. And unfortunately, we had 2 officers injured. Both of them are back to work. And then one victim of the assault who is from out of town. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll have Chief Dudowski, and then we'll entertain questions.
Good afternoon. I'd just like to echo Mayor Cranley as Mr. Black's feeling. We do have the finest police department in the nation, and I'd like to add that the fire department as well. They asked me to speak here today about the All-Star Game, and just to give you a little overview, what we've been doing and where we are today, and of course to take any questions after that. But I've been working very closely with City Manager Office, Mr. Scott Stiles, and with Cincinnati Police, Captain Mike Neville. There's been a host of people that have been working on this event before last year's All-Star Game in 2014. Several of us attended in Minneapolis. We learned, we talked to the police and the fire departments and the other agencies there. We learned quite a bit. We've been working diligently with Major League Baseball. But I'd like to emphasize that this is really a series of one-day events, and we've handled these types of events in the past. Riverfest has as many people, if not more, on a given day than we'll have down on a particular day for the All-Star Game of series of events. You get into the World Choir Games that I know many of you covered, and that went flawlessly. Our expectation is that we're going to continue, we're going to excel beyond how we answered those calls and how we kept those events safe and secure and enjoyable for all the participants. Just to give you a little bit of an overview, the amount of agencies that have been working on this, again, for well over a year is just staggering. Just a few to name off. We've been working with the FBI. They have what they call a SEER rating, a Special Event Assessment Rating, which this is a level of 3. That brings a whole host of federal resources that have been supporting us in our ability, preparation to plan. We've been working closely with the United States Coast Guard and TSA for all the activities on the waterways and on the rivers. Again, very safe and secure operation will be taking place there. Other federal agencies, the United States Environmental Protection Agency for air monitoring and quality, if you will. State agencies have also been involved. The Ohio National Guard Civil Support Team, very closely with our ability to respond to any types of unforeseen types of events, in addition to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources and Kentucky Fish and Wildlife. And finally, the real boots on the ground are your own local agencies, your own local Cincinnati Police, Cincinnati Fire, Cincinnati Health Department. We've been working very closely with the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office and Hamilton County Emergency Management Agency. Also, the communication centers are coordinating very closely. We even have fire departments from throughout the region involved. Miami Township is bringing resources, Colerain Township, Newport Fire and Police, Covington Fire and Police. We've been meeting in earnest, again, well over a year ago and up through next Tuesday and even thereafter to make sure that this event is safe and secure. And you'll be able to tell that we did our job because we'll be out of sight and out of mind. Even though all these resources are very much there, hopefully you'll see very few of them, except you will see a lot of police presence on the street, and you'll see volunteers on the street from the Chamber Supporting Agency. They'll be in green vests with radio communications helping to keep an eye on things as well and keeping things safe. So I'll finally conclude with the Multi-Agency Coordination Center that will be operating from Radcliffe, the Regional Operations Center. If there would be an issue, we're prepared to bring in additional resources to deal with whatever that is. And then in addition, there's dozens of cameras that are monitored continuously by the police department to make sure, again, that nothing's going on that shouldn't be going on. So there are varying levels, layers of security, of people watching over. And again, we don't anticipate anything, but we're assured that we do have the federal, state, and local resources in place should we have any kind of an incident that needs to be addressed. So when my family, friends are coming down, I encourage them to come down, and likewise to everybody here. Get tickets if you can get them. If you know where to get them, let me know. But, you know, that's going to be the hardest thing over these next couple weeks is finding tickets to some of these great events. So we look forward to seeing you all downtown. Thank you.
Okay, before we move into questions and answers, I just want to reiterate something that I think the mayor, myself, I think we see on a regular basis is that just stating a fact, and the fact is that we have one of the most competent and capable police departments in the country. They have our full support, and assistance with whatever they need. The Fountain Square incident was clearly an event-based incident, and as a result, we've learned some things from it. Nothing draconian, all very basic, simple stuff that can be dealt with in the future. So at this time, we will entertain questions.
Well, what have you learned from the chief or mayor or Captain Neville? Because you say protocol was absent. So was this a surprise event or was it scheduled and planned?
Well, as the manager just said, this was an event-based problem. This is not, if you know, we have salsa on the square, we have movie nights on the square, we had the soccer game last night, all without a hitch. We had an event, a hip-hop concert that was targeted to young people. You know, we're not going to spend too much time, you know, playing the blame game, but let's just say that we take responsibility. 3CDC, our partners, taking responsibility. We're working together to make sure we don't have that kind of programming again, or if we do, that we have the right number of officers at the right time that doesn't conflict with curfew and all those other problems. That is not going to be on the, that is not the programming schedule for this weekend, and it won't be on a schedule for any weekend until we have the right protocols in place to prevent that from happening again. But one of the things that I'm worried about, candidly, for the way this has played out over the last 2 days, is that the event has not been properly identified, and there's a perception out there that is false that this is like a typical, this could happen on any given night at Fountain Square. That's just not true. Last night, there were thousands of people there having a wonderful time. Thursday night, there was a reggae concert that people had a blast at without incident. When you target young people without adults, you know, everyone knows who's a parent that kids need more attention and more oversight. And so we either need to have a lot more oversight for events like that, or we need to put them on pause until we've got it figured out.
Are you saying that there was not enough police presence on the square on Saturday night?
Of course not. There was, once we got word that things were getting out of control, and our officers ran to the scene and got it under control quickly. But clearly an event like that needed a lot more police, and shouldn't have been as late at night.
As we approach the All-Star Week, what do you say to visitors coming in from out of town who are seeing news reports of this? What do you say to people from Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana? What do you say to the locals who say, I'm not sure I want to come down here because of this incident?
Well, Tom, I'm hoping to get your help, that you'll help me tell them that Saturday night, as the manager said, was an event-based problem. Those events aren't scheduled for this weekend. This weekend is family-friendly, all-star game, Major League Baseball organized, Fan Fest at Duke Energy Center. I don't even know the name of this young act that's coming at Paul Brown Stadium, but apparently there'll be 50,000 teenagers at Paul Brown Stadium on the weekend. It's going to be safe family fun, and it's going to be a blast. And the fact is that Sunday night, the day after this event, thousands of people were at Fountain Square without incident for the World Soccer Team game, World Cup USA women's team. And it was an event-based problem. I take responsibility for it, but those events won't be repeated. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Two things. The assault, the offense report on the assault, the man over by Government Square is listed as a hate crime, was it?
At this time, the answer is no. We don't have reason to believe, to prosecution purposes, if and when this individual is found. We believe we have the right resources in place to locate those involved in this, but I have no reason to believe that this associates itself into a hate crime.
The other thing,
Sure.
just along the same line, Captain, calling him an innocent victim. I know when he's lying there bleeding, he looked like an innocent victim, but just if you look at the video that leads up to it, he's very engaged in the fighting. In fact, encourages it several times. If you call him an innocent victim, it makes it sound like he was jumped and beaten. I'm not sure that the video backs that up. Do you have an opinion on that?
Subjectively, my opinion, I'm not going to say whether he's an innocent victim. I don't have all the facts. My investigators will keep me apprised of what's going on along the way based on video that I'm hearing about that I haven't seen yet. So a victim is a victim, whether somebody wants to label them an innocent one or not. We will view victims as just that.
Okay.
At this time, miss, I cannot.
Okay. I think, if I may, Captain, yet to be determined. They're still, doing their post-incident assessing and review. I just want to mention one other thing. Obviously, this is a very bad situation, but again, it speaks to the good work that the entire city of Cincinnati has been doing for the past several years, particularly under the leadership of Steve Leeper and 3CDC. Downtown Cincinnati is got to be the most bustling downtown that I've been a part of during my entire career. So everybody, the demand for downtown and Fountain Square is great. People recognize it as a great space, and we intend to do everything that we can to make sure that that continues to be the case. Yes, Steve. Come on, Steve.
The mayor's correct. We accept responsibility for this. And remind everybody that compounded on this date was 4th of July, which right up the street, thousands of people were in Washington Park. Now, 5 years ago, we would probably be having this conversation about Washington Park. Today we're having the mayor is right. We probably reached our capacity that day. We had a lot going on in the city. We had this event in Washington Park. We had the Reds playing in front of a full house. We had this event that probably stretched too long that night. And as the mayor indicated, this event sometimes does attract kids that shouldn't be bumping up against curfew. But remind everybody, we have had, in the last 8 years or so, 9 years since Fountain Square has been redone and Washington Park has now been done, thousands and thousands and thousands of events.
But haven't police come to you before and said, this kind of concert?
What is that kind of concert?
Well,
You've just,
concert. That's what-
we have free concerts every night.
If the police ever come to you and say,
But-
this is
but-
a problem.
But no, I'm just trying to understand that when you say that kind of concert, I want to understand what you're saying.
Supervised concert attracting young people.
We have had that concert for 5 or 6 years.
Has the police ever come to you and said this could cause problems?
The police, on individual shows, we have had concerns.
Okay.
But we've had concerns in other parts and other events. This is a public space. We have tried to create a diverse family set of events, some other events that serve other different populations. We have been doing that for a long time. So if we want to sit there and say, I told you so game, I don't think that's productive.
Yeah. Okay, to sort of add to what Steve has had to say, clearly there's a lot of growth, there's a lot of activity, there's greater demand for activity downtown, which is a good thing. The incident on Saturday, we should also look at as a learning opportunity. As we assess it, debrief ourselves, what can we do better the next time in terms of working together from a coordination standpoint, et cetera. Again, I think Steve really summed it up when he said that, we've hit a tipping point directly related to progress. So I urge you to keep that in mind as well.
Chief Blackwell, Captain Neville, the idea of curfew, how much is going to be placed on enforcement of curfew for these events for MLB this weekend? I know the curfew was taken out of the 90-day plan per se specifically, but how much impact is the curfew going to make this weekend?
Well, you're right. It has been taken out of the plan. There were some concerns relayed to us by various people in the community that the curfew portion of the summer safety plan could become problematic, could become viewed as over-policing minority youth as it has been in other cities. That's the issue with curfew in a nutshell. However, after the chain of events this past weekend, we're going to be looking at making not just downtown safe, but the entire city. We're not going to abdicate our responsibility to the rest of the communities because we have a big job downtown. So we're ready.
We just said, though, that there are going to be 60,000 kids, whatever, probably in curfew range, age range. How is that going to be?
They're going to be with their adults. They're going to be with their parents.
Right. We look at the, what's her name, Ariana Grande? We look at that concert a little a little differently. I know both the managers will be there with their daughters, and some other folks here will be there as well. But we anticipate there to be more guardianship of parents at that concert than was displayed at Fountain Square.
What about the perception outside of Cincinnati and the Tri-State area? Hundreds of thousands have shared that video on Facebook. There's one image that stood out to me, and it was a mother holding a small child. They were both crying, scared, and you see that image, and it really resonates. That fear. What do you say?
Saturday night was a bad night. It was a bad night. It was not what we want. And people were hurt, officers were hurt, and we all have to decide, without playing the blame game, that we're all responsible. We're taking responsibility. The fact is, it was an event targeted to young people that weren't properly chaperoned. We're not going to let that happen again. All such events will be examined, and the police will approve or disapprove on a going forward basis before we allow any such planning of events like that to happen again. What happened last week was bad, and we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again, and we do need your help to tell the true story that thousands of people were there last night, thousands of people were there on Thursday night for reggae night. This is about the age and programming and timing, and as Steve pointed out, it was 4th of July weekend. There were a lot of different factors, but the fact is that there's only so many cops to go around. We're at capacity. As Steve pointed out, we had thousands of people in Washington Park the same night, no problem. Thousands of people at the Reds game, no problem. By the way, there were cops at both places helping people get out to and from those events. We had a lot of cops at Fountain Square, probably didn't have enough. Then we had to bring a whole bunch of cops to get control of the situation. So we know that the police, we have the best police force in the world that can control a situation once it's happening. Our job, by doing better programming and making sure we don't attract the kinds of crowds at Fountain Square that we can't handle, to prevent that from happening in the first place, by making sure that the event planning is appropriate for the manpower that we have in the police department and for Fountain Square.
With the officers who were on patrol, the off-duty detail at the 11 o'clock hour when this unfolded in the way it did, there were 8 officers on Fountain Square.
And are those officers paid by 3TDC, or are they paid by the hotspot policing that we're doing for the whole summer?
Those officers were a variety of ways that they were being paid.
Going forward for the All-Star Game this weekend, can you give us an overview, Captain Neville or Chief Blackwell, an overview of what we're going to see security-wise? The mayor mentioned hundreds of officers. Can you give us specifics on deployment without giving away tactics?
Yeah, we don't want to give you our secrets. But the thing that I think you're going to see more of, and Chief Dadowski spoke of this, is you're going to see a layered response with more than just police officers. We're going to have our citizens on patrol, our downtown ambassadors. We're going to have a myriad of resources and assets that are very visible to our out-of-state, out-of-city visitors for this week, starting Thursday night. So it's not going to just be uniformed officers. We're going to have a lot of undercover police officers as well. So we're fully confident that the plan that Chief Dadowski and Chief Humphreys worked on for almost 2 years now will be successful.
Same question I asked the mayor. What do you say to people coming downtown or thinking about coming downtown for All-Star games, based if they've heard about these things or seen these things?
We're the safest big city in America. That's what I say. Period.
Look, you haven't asked me, but I'll say the same. I think this All-Star Week, based on the various layers of law enforcement that will be in force, I don't believe it would be an overstatement to say that Cincinnati will be the safest city in America for this week.
One council member who I believe is going to introduce a motion to bring back the mounted patrol unit. I know that's a budget item. I know we've been down this road. Are you amenable to that? Because it strikes me that this weekend could be a tremendous PR.
Listen, I heard earlier today from Jason Dunn, who is on the SORTA board, who's on the Police Foundation, that he was going to try to bring private resources to bear to bring back the mounted patrol for this weekend. That would be great if someone could do that with private resources. It would make a difference. However, we need as many officers on the street as possible. We are they're a little bit nervous about announcing the numbers, but we're going to have hundreds of officers visible all weekend through the All-Star game, and we got to make sure that our resources are used as efficiently as possible to get as many cops out there as possible. But the idea of a private foundation, if they can collaborate quickly, obviously time's a wasting, with our police department, I'm open to that if it's paid for privately and can be cooperated with them in a short amount of time.
I'd like to also add to that. I like horses. When I was in Baltimore, they tried to cut the police mounted unit every year. I would not let them. I've told Chief Blackwell I look forward to working with him and supporting him in terms of doing something in terms of a mounted presence of some sort.
One more question. Just clarify again, to follow up on Deb's question, versus against the white hate crime kind of thing. There is no definite determination right now, even though it was listed that way, Captain?
Sir, I take responsibility if that was inaccurate. Right now, I don't have a reason to label that as a hate crime. It is an ongoing investigation. I would tell you, preliminary speaking, that report was incorrect.